looking at the technological advances. I used to be on dial-up looking for...
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. What I want to do right now is a short conversation on the Lacey Evans controversy that's been going on all day on December the 20th. So Lacey Evans puts out I think it's a video on her Instagram account. I'm not entirely sure what it is now because she took it down. But the video or the screenshot that's been going around, it states that ADD, ADHD, autism didn't exist before. It says, back when I was a kid, there was no such thing as those things, right? And it's an old guy sitting in a chair. This is clearly a part of something that she's watching or sharing or whatever. And it says, watch the full reel, because it's on Instagram or something. So it's like somebody clipped a video or something out of context. This led to a lot of backlash and people deciding that they were going to emote all over the internet. So Lacey Evans responded by saying, I watched a video on the impact processed foods is having on our children, and I shared the video. Shrug soldiers emoji. Y'all are insane. So I'm not going to go, again, too deep into it. I'm not going to take this subject lightly like I usually do. Because if there's one thing I'm serious about is being intellectually curious. And something that I think has really damaged the fabric of the United States is the closed mind that a lot of people have. The inability to question things without being offended, without being outraged, without being upset. To basically look at a subject and say, that's interesting, let's look into it, let's see what's going on. So she's saying she just wanted to know about the effect processed food is having on our children. Really good. Guess what? There's real scientists who are looking into this stuff. There's people who are genuinely interested in this stuff. Nutritionists talk about it. Bodybuilders talk about it. Vegans talk about it. Pretty much everybody who has anything to do with the body talks a little bit, at least, about the impact of what you eat on your body. She's a mother. She's saying, well, is the stuff that I feed my daughter, potato chips and frozen foods, does that stuff have an effect on her? Did it have an effect on her even when she was in the womb? That's one thing to look at. And that's, to me, the major point of this. The second point is what we get from Sean Ross Sapp. He says, no, you shared a video blaming autism and ADHD diagnosis on it, meaning processed foods. He then says, the stuff you're sharing on Instagram is so irresponsible, stupid, and hurtful. Do better than that, please. You have over 1 million followers, and peddling misinformation to that level is borderline hateful, whether you intended it to be or not. Let me be honest by saying nothing that he said here shows that he knows anything about the subjects being broached. You could literally be talking about anything. Oh no, it's irresponsible, stupid, and hurtful. Hurtful to who? Stupid how? Who is it supposed to hurt? There's a couple of kinds of people here. Like, who are the subjects of this conversation? The subjects are people with autism, people with ADHD, and some kind of neurological disorder. And then the people who make processed foods, and the people who consume processed foods. Who is being attacked if you say these things didn't exist, which is the uncharitable view, by saying these things didn't exist when I was a kid, which is what the video is captioned to have said. Who is hurt by that? The people with autism? Are you hurt by saying autism didn't exist 100 years ago? No. Is it true that autism didn't exist 100 years ago? Probably not. It's probably not true. Is it true that ADHD didn't exist 100 years ago? It's probably not true. Maybe that language is new, because we constantly have, like, they used to call people hyper, right? We used to hear that so much as a kid, like, God, he's so hyper. She's so hyper. She's so busy. Because people didn't have the language of ADHD, right? You just call them hyper, a busybody, In the past, they didn't have the language ADHD or whatever. These are all psychological and neurological disorders that people have worked on for years to look at symptoms and cobble these things together and decided, okay, this is what ADHD looks like. This is what autism looks like. And it took several years for us to get there. That doesn't mean that these things don't exist. It means that it took us a while to cobble these ideas together as one simple problem. And if that's what she was trying to put out there, it was false. Let's say you put out there that ADHD and autism didn't exist 100 years ago. Okay, it's false. Now, if you just accept that uncharitable view of what she put out there, it's false. Who does that hurt? Who is that offending? That's what I want. He said it was borderline hateful. Hateful to who? This is so empty. It's just an immediate knee-jerk reaction from somebody who is just as ignorant as she is. You claim you just want to call somebody out. I want to score some points from calling people out. And I see all these people virtue signaling online about how they have ADHD and how they was diagnosed with autism, or they have a child with autism and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you do know that most of the time when we have problems like autism or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or whatever, we do find that there's probably a genetic component, but then there's also an environmental component. She's talking about the possibility of there being an environmental component, which is, common sense. If they'd have said, for instance, lead in the paint, when people found out that lead in paint could cause neurological disorders, nobody got angry and got upset because you said that, maybe these kids are pretty screwed up because, there's a significant amount of lead in the paint or lead in the water or something like that. Some kind of metallics in that, that they're constantly putting in their mouth or ingesting in some way. Nobody can complain about that. You're not being attacked by somebody saying that the things that you are constantly in contact with in your environment perhaps poisoned your fetus. That's not an attack on you. If anything, it's a big red alert by saying, hey, maybe we eat too much processed foods. If that's the case, then we should be saying to ourselves, is it hateful towards, ConAgra, Monsanto, and everybody who makes all this super processed food? Well, let me tell you this, for the record, and I know that Lacey Evans did a commercial for corn dogs, and they kept bringing that up, throwing that up in her face. Oh, she did a commercial for corn dogs. Well, let me be clear. Just because she did a commercial for corn dogs, there's three things here. One, we don't know what she knew about processed foods when she did it. She probably wasn't thinking about the processed foods when she did the commercial. Two, how do you even know she consumes that product, let alone feeds it to her child? You don't. Jeff Goldblum probably lives in a mansion. He doesn't literally use apartments.com. Craig Robinson doesn't eat Pizza Hut every day. The people can do commercials for products that they don't really use. Okay? I'm sorry to break that to you. But as a man who thinks, I have to tell you, just because you do a commercial for something doesn't mean you use the product. The guy who created Lunchables, I think his name is Bob Drake or Bob Drain or something like that. He doesn't even let his children eat Lunchables. Why? And he'll tell you why. Excess salt, excess sugar, excess fat. Processed foods or foods in general do have an effect on the body. Yes, obesity existed 100 years ago, but people are far more obese now than they were before. High blood pressure, yeah, that existed 100 years ago. High blood pressure to the degree that it is today, heart disease. Everything, transgenderism. There's so many different things that are way, way up 100%, 300% over 30 years. You can go back 40 years and look at some old videos. You hardly see a fat person in it. Go back 100 years, you'll probably never see any fat people in it. I'm just saying think. I'm not saying whether Lacey Evans is right or wrong. That's not even important. It's not important whether she's right or wrong. She's a fucking wrestler. She's not a nutritionist. Okay? She doesn't know what she's talking about, but neither do the people who are attacking her. Because guess what? There are real researchers looking at this question about whether the processed foods that you ingest could quite possibly be causing autism or different things like that in your children. Well, for proof, I'm going to read just a little piece of an article from the University of Central Florida. It says, from June 20th, 2019, it says, processed foods may hold key to rise in autism. In the lab, UCF scientists found exposing neural stem cells to excessive PPA damages brain cells in several ways. Now, this is an interesting subject. Now, you have to know what PPA means and all this kind of stuff. Again, if you wanted to really attack Lacey Evans and what she believes, this is what you would know. You would want to know what are they looking at here. Now, I have to go to a different article because I had to find a definition of PPA. So it says processing risks. Could eating processed foods while pregnant increase the likelihood of childhood autism? Recent findings by UCF researchers suggest yes. This is from 2019. It says autism diagnoses have risen 15% in the past 6 years, with 1 in 59 U.S. children now being diagnosed with a developmental disorder. As a result, scientists are working diligently to understand the overlapping genetic and environmental factors that cause it. And a group of researchers at UCF may have found a link. Processed foods. Children with autism often experience gastrointestinal issues, which led UCF professor Saleh Nasser to wonder if there is a link between the gut and brain, and how gut bacteria differ from those who have autism. In a study published in Scientific Reports, Nasser and his team, including postdoctoral scholar Latifa Abdelli and undergraduate research assistant Asila Samsam, discovered that a food preservative known as propionic acid can alter how a fetus's brain develops during pregnancy, leading to autism. So, who is this hate speech, Sean Ross Sapp? I mean, this doesn't mean that it's actually true. This is just a researcher looking at something and said, hey, I found a link. You know, this could possibly be something later on. It's going to take probably another 10 or 15 years more research in order to say anything definitively. But see, this is what intellectuals, people who think, this is what they do. Right? They look at questions. People come up with crazy conspiracy theories and they look into this stuff and they say, well, it's baseless or it's true. Right now, Lacey Evans is getting the Galileo treatment. You know, Galileo comes out, hey, maybe, just maybe, we revolve around the sun. The sun doesn't revolve around us. And they're going to throw tomatoes at her and talk about how terrible she is. Who knows, in 15 years, she might fuck around and be right. Now, it can get ridiculous that you have wrestlers like, Austin Aries, who stands on the soapbox and yells about how veganism is the best and how it's superior, and other, YouTube vegans and other kind of vegans who talk about how you're going to get heart disease if you keep eating meat. It's no different than how annoying it is to see these anti-smoking commercials where you're going to definitely get lung cancer if you smoke a cigarette. They can't say that shit for sure. Guess what? You can't say it for sure. Is there a link between heart disease and eating meat? Absolutely. Meat has fat in it. Fat that will clog up your arteries. Yes, you can definitely say that eating excessive amounts of meats like bacon or cheeseburgers or whatever could clog your arteries. Excessive grease and stuff like that. Yes, it can. Smoking cigarettes, putting tar in your lungs, could it increase your likelihood of getting lung cancer? Yes. Does it mean most definitely that you're going to get lung cancer? No. People have smoked their entire lives and never gotten lung cancer. Some people have never smoked at all and gotten lung cancer. Guess what? These are nuanced, complex issues. Something like autism or something like ADHD is a complex issue. If they can find something that might be a risk factor and say to people, maybe you cut down on some of the frozen foods or some of the processed foods while you're pregnant. Just like, hey, cut out the cigarettes, cut out the alcohol. Maybe you want to cut out some of the processed food. Maybe not sit around and eat Doritos all day. Then maybe your weight wouldn't blow up and you wouldn't get like what they call pregnancy diabetes. I think they say they can get that. It's weird stuff. And I'm not trying to say that Lacey Evans is right. It's not about whether she's right or wrong. She can be wrong. She's positing an idea that in a healthy society where people actually looked to be intellectually stimulated, they could look at this and say, well, this is an interesting subject. Here's what the research looks like. Here's what people who are researching the subject, this is what they're talking about. Meanwhile, we're living in fucking Idiotville, stupid world, where everything is an opportunity to be offended. Everything is an opportunity to yell and scream and talk about how you personally, as a person with ADHD, are offended, or how you're a person with autism, or your child has autism and you're offended. Well, guess what? That's too bad. If your child has autism and you could have prevented it, why not? Why? Let's say you take the uncharitable view. Autism didn't exist 100 years ago. And that they're still not saying that people are making it up. They're saying perhaps the increase in processed foods made these things possible. Wouldn't that be an interesting thing that we need to know? Why are we protecting ConAgra, Monsanto, and everybody else who makes these processed foods? Why are we protecting them? I'm supposed to be the corporate shill around here. I don't trust super huge conglomerates like Monsanto, nor do I trust Big Pharma. And guess what? The diagnoses, part of the reason why it's been an explosion is because there's pills to sell. Oh, see, I shouldn't have said that, right? Now probably YouTube is going to get on my case. Whenever there's pills to be sold, you're going to get an excessive amount of diagnoses. And there's a lot of belief that something like ADHD is probably overdiagnosed for that very reason. And part of the reason why something like ADHD or autism, why it kind of bothers people, is because these concepts are fairly new in terms of being able to find symptoms. Sometimes it can be kind of nebulous, like you hear the autism spectrum. And people just say, okay, well, the autism spectrum just means it's an umbrella so that we can find any and everything and throw it under this kid has autism as a way to sort of explain any type of poor behavior or behaviors that we don't like. Same thing with ADHD. It's like, we don't like this kid's behavior. He's too busy. He's a busybody. He's too hyper. He jumps around too much. He thinks too much. He talks too much. He plays too much. He can't sit down. Pump full of pills, right? And people believe it for whatever reason. Because kids have always been hyperactive. I've never met a child that wasn't hyperactive. Everybody knows all about the Cat Williams joke, right? About, how he ran around, and then his dad pumped him full of pills and he couldn't move. Was that hate speech? That, when he was pumped up full of pills as a child? Was that hate speech? I would think that if I had ADHD, I would want to know if I really need that medication. Was it just behavioral, or was it really a chemical imbalance in your brain where you couldn't turn off your body? Because guess what? It is true that some people literally, physically cannot sit still. People, high anxiety people, they constantly shake. They're constantly walking. They're constantly talking. They're constantly moving. I've seen those people. I worked with those people. That stuff is real. But in children, I don't know, man. That's where we get a little bit more nebulous. That's where we get a little bit more, I'm not so sure, right? These kinds of things need to be talked about in an adult way and discussed in an adult way. The idea that we're just going to sit here and ridicule people who have probably looked into this more than you have is ridiculous. The amount of knee-jerk, shut the fuck up, she should be fired, yada, yada, yada. It shows me that our society has turned off the ability to think or to ask questions. Even if you think she's wrong, she's not attacking anybody. Even if you think she's wrong, it makes no sense to do what they're doing. It means that you have a life that is so unfulfilling that you need the approval of weirdos online to hit that little heart button, to let them think I stand with you. And all the people who need the virtue signal about my child with autism, or I have autism, or I have ADHD, like Nick Camarado from AEW. Look, it's not an attack on you. People are looking to see, hey, is there an environmental factor, something that we can cut out, something that we can work on that can help this situation? I mean, why wouldn't you? When there was lead in the water, lead in paint, they bitched and complained But ultimately, it was probably for the best that we got rid of that. You know? If smoking cigarettes can give you cancer, maybe it's for the best that we actually look into stopping people from smoking cigarettes. If eating processed foods can cut down on the processed foods, can cut down on the autism or the ADHD, why not? Why not? And if it doesn't work, then hell, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen? We cut into some of the profits of Monsanto, ConAgra, and the gigantic big pharma. We stop paying them for the pills and everything. Great. Nobody's actually hurt or killed in this situation. And by hook or crook, if there's somebody who really does have autism, really does have ADHD, and it's not caused by processed foods, guess what? Your medications, your therapies, all this stuff still exists. It's still there. We just looked at something that says that we thought might have been a cause and it wasn't. Wow. Everybody's hurt by this. It's so ridiculous. It's so intellectually lazy to instead. And look, it costs you nothing to ignore it. Really, you could just ignore it. If you think it's silly, you don't know anything about it, you're not sure, you could just ignore it. She's not saying, hey, everybody, look at this. It's almost the exact same situation as the Kyrie Irving thing, right? I know it's going to take me a while to get there, but I was going to get there eventually. Now, Kyrie Irving just put out this thing, says, hey, look at this, and then everybody just starts attacking the guy. Instead of intellectually discussing the subject, it becomes name-calling, labeling. You should be fired. You should be suspended. We should punish you for wrongthink. That's what we should do. Because we're too fucking lazy to actually engage with the material that you brought me. You bring some material instead of saying, you know what? I don't know anything about this. I'm just going to ignore it. Or, I know a little bit about this. Let me jump into it. Here's what I know. And then, especially on something like Twitter or Facebook or something like that, where there's more people, you never know what other people know. You know what I'm saying? Somebody might actually be able to you might fuck around and stumble across one of these researchers. He might be a wrestling fan. You might stumble across his research and be like, wow, here's what I think from my, several years of research on this subject. And we might all be better for it. Because who the fuck is paying attention to the University of Central Florida doing research on processed foods and autism? Nobody. Nobody outside of that academic bubble is paying attention to that shit. Okay? So people like us, we don't know that much about it. I don't know shit about autism, man. I don't know shit about ADHD, man. I don't. Admittedly, I don't. So I'm not talking about those subjects specifically. I'm talking about the act of not being intellectually curious, of not being a person who wants to crack open a book. I'm always willing to dive into YouTube University. I'm always willing to jump into Google. And no, I don't believe everything I read or everything I see, because I know what rigorous research looks like. I know when something is a mere research question and when something is supposed to be an answer. I know that too. I'm not a moron. And guess what? Most people aren't morons. Nobody's going to just stumble across Lacey Evans on Instagram and think, my God, she's telling the truth. It's all processed foods. It's all garbage. And what they're going to do, go throw away everything in their freezer? Who's hurt? You cleaned up your life and you started eating healthier. My God, what's the worst that can happen? Your blood pressure goes down. Wow. You start losing, you may start losing some weight. Holy shit. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? If you got ADHD, you already got it. If you got autism, you already got it. So what she's saying can't really hurt you or help you. Only that maybe processed foods was a cause. Maybe it's not. We don't know. And maybe these things didn't exist to this degree 100 years ago. Maybe they did. We don't know. We asking questions here. The fact that people can't take questions being asked is an embarrassment on the educational system of the United States. And I, for one, am not surprised to see it because it's run by the state. So there that go. But having people who are solidly on leftist politics, standing up for giant corporations and saying it's hurtful for you to say that ADHD and autism didn't exist 100 years ago, and now big pharma is pumping pills into everybody. Well, that's something I would pay attention to. You know, I would definitely be paying attention to how many people are out here popping pills now. You know, some of that stuff is environmental. A lot of the diabetes, the high blood pressure, people who don't know how much salt they intake in a day. You know, unfortunately, my parents went through that. You know, I got cousins. I know so many people with diabetes. I'm wondering if it's fucking genetic, and it probably is to a degree. That doesn't mean that you can sit around and drink Coca-Cola and Pepsi all day because, well, I probably already got it in my genes. Same thing with alcoholism. Just because you might have it in your genes. My dad was an alcoholic. That's why I don't drink. Because I know I have an alcoholic predisposition. I'm not going to engage in that shit. Right? Same thing with schizophrenia. I don't smoke weed because I don't engage in things that's going to alter my brain. Because I already have a genetic predisposition for it. And look, I already know there's people ready to type with their fingers. There is no connection between weed and schizophrenia. It's like, well, schizophrenia, what is that? It makes you paranoid. You hear things, see things. Right? You smoke weed, you hear things, see things, get paranoid. Well, you know, doesn't work for everybody. It's not going to make everybody schizophrenic. But for some people who have a genetic predisposition for it, it ain't good for you. And I don't need it. Most people don't need it. So I'm 100% on the anti-weed, anti-drugs bandwagon. I don't care if other people want to do it, but you have to understand the risk that you're taking. It's the same thing when you sit around all day eating Doritos. If you'd have came to me when I was 16 drinking fucking 2 liters of pop by myself and saying, you know, you keep doing that shit, you're going to be popping a cocktail of pills for the rest of your life. You're going to be 400 pounds and you're going to be fucked up. I probably would have told you to fuck off. I'm 16. I'm doing whatever I want. And then thankfully, I'm studious. I learned. I stopped doing that shit. I stopped eating so much chocolate. I stopped eating so many potato chips. You know, I cut down on my meat consumption. I didn't get rid of it. I'm not the most in shape guy in the world, but I'm trying to be healthier. Because I'm trying to cut down on some of the risk factors. As I get older, I know I'm at a higher risk for things like prostate cancer and breast cancer, even in men, yes. Different blood disorders and all this kind of stuff. I know I can get these things. I didn't know that as a kid when I was dousing myself in fucking Tahitian treat, cheap pop, tons and tons of fucking sugar in your body all at one time. You know, it's fucking up your skin and everything too. It's like, come on, man. But as somebody who is intellectually curious, I wanted to know about the stuff that I was putting in my body. I wanted to know about the stuff that there was being sold to my little brothers, that's being sold to my mom, the pills that are being stuffed in my mom's mouth. She's taking 100 different fucking pills every day. Thyroid pills, blood pills for heart conditions, pills for this, pills for diabetes, all this kind of shit. Like, okay, how can I not go down that road? You know? If I can help it, if there's something I could do on an environmental level to not go down that road, let's do it. Let's do it now. You know? Why wait till I'm fucking 60 and have to pound pills all day? Because that's what Big Pharma wants. That's what the fucking government wants. They want you on Medicare and Medicaid pounding pills all day. I don't want to do that. Most people don't want to. And if you're on ADHD, if you got ADHD or you were told you had ADHD as a kid, and you got used to popping pills, and you say to yourself, maybe I don't want to do this, there might be something on an environmental level that you can do to change things. Now, if you already got it, you already got it. There's nothing you can do. You already got bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or whatever. You just got to take your medication. It is what it is. But if you can prevent it, you would try. That's what we're talking about here. Can you prevent it? Or is it genetic? Is it mama fell down the stairs and now you have autism? Or is it mama ate too many Taco Bell Doritos and now you have autism? We don't know. And because we're intellectually curious people, we're looking into it. We're trying to help the future generation. It probably ain't got nothing to do with you. It probably can't help you. But there's probably a kid 10, 15 years from now who, if they find some kind of link, and they say, enough of this, we can help it, avoid this, And now that child is born without autism. That child is born without having to pop Adderall for the rest of the goddamn life. Isn't everybody better off for that? Where's the hate speech? I don't get it. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.
MongoSlade. Best house I ever drew, Daddy.